The Boxcar Children, Blue Bay Mystery by Gertrude Chandler Warner. Chapter 4. The Lifeboat. "How do we get ready, Lars?" asked Benny as they stood on the deck. "First, we start to pack the biggest lifeboat," said Lars. "We love to do things like that," said Jessie. Her eyes were very bright. "What do we pack?" "We must take a lot of food," said Lars. "Then we'll not have to live on bananas." "Bananas!" cried Benny. "I'd like to live on bananas." "Believe me, you could," said Lars, smiling. "They grow wild. Just put up your hand and pick a banana whenever you want." "Oh boy," said Mike. "Come on, let's go." Mr. Alden looked at the children. Then he said, "Lars, you tell us all exactly what to do. You be the boss." "Very good," said Lars. "I'll do that. Be sure to take shoes and not little thin ones. You'll be walking over sharp rocks and shells. Don't take any best clothes, but sports clothes. I'll pack the food we need." "Oh, Lars, let me pack the food with you," begged Mike. "And me too," shouted Benny. "It won't take a minute to pack my clothes." "All right, all of you can help. Come to the gallery when you are ready." Captain Brown laughed. "Don't forget 7 blankets," he said. Is it very cold on the island?" asked Violet. "No, it is very hot," said the captain. "You sleep on top of the blankets." Each one went to pack his small bag. Then they ran to the galley. "Isn't it exciting?" said Mike. "I think this is nice." "I hope it will be," said Lars. "Now here is some dry milk." He gave Mike a lot of little boxes to put in a big box. "Let's have some beans, Lars," said Benny. "We all like beans." "Just what I was going to say," said Lars. He was down on the floor beside the box. "Beans will do instead of bread. We can't take any bread." "I don't like bread very well anyway," said Mike. "Oh," said Benny, "I've seen you eat 10 slices of bread at a time." "And you too," cried Mark. "Careful, boys," said Henry. "Have a good time, but don't fight." Jessie looked over the cans and boxes. "Let's take some cereal," she said. "That will last a few days." "Here is some sea biscuits," said Lars, and he gave Mike 2 tin boxes. "Sea biscuits?" said Mike, looking at the picture on the box. "I don't call those sea biscuits. I call them crackers." "Even so, Mr. Mike, those are called sea biscuits," said Lars. "Okay," said Mike. "You call them sea biscuits, and I'll call them crackers. Then I know what I mean." "Matches," said Henry quietly. He put some in the big box. "Good," said Lars. "We will need a fire because we will catch fish and cook them." "We will need dishes," said Jessie. "Not too many," said Lars. "We can use leaves for plates, but take a big spoon and some knives, a hatchet too to cut trees." At last the big box was ready. The children went back to their deck chairs. "Watch now," said Lars. "We will soon see the island. Look out there over the rail. It will look like nothing at first." The children watched. For a long time they saw nothing but blue sea. Lars saw the island first, but he said nothing. He looked at all the children to see who saw it first. Suddenly Henry went to the rail. Is that land, Lars, or is it nothing?" he said. "It is land," said Lars, smiling. "Soon we will see the green palm trees and the big round bay. I told you it looked like nothing at first." Everyone went to the rail and watched the green spot. An hour or so later they could see white sand around the edges. They could see the waves on the beach. The sea star came nearer and nearer. They could see big palm trees bending over the water. The ship stopped. The crew began to let the lifeboat down into the water. They put in the 7 blankets and the big box. The family and 4 sailors went down a ladder into the lifeboat. They all sat down. Another lifeboat was fastened to their boat for the sailors' return to the ship. Lars said to Henry, "You sit on this seat and watch how I use the rudder." "All right, sir," said Henry. Captain Brown called, You can expect us in 2 or 3 weeks, but don't worry if we are late." "I hope you will be late," said Mike. "It will be so much fun on the island, and we won't want to leave." "I hope so," said the captain, laughing, and you all mind Lars. He knows best." The men untied the rope and the lifeboat started out on the big ocean. The boat tipped and rocked. "Should we be afraid, Lars?" asked Violet. "No, Miss Violet, not afraid, but we are all going to get very wet. Wet from head to foot." "All right," said Benny, "but why will we get wet? Do you think we'll fall out of the boat?" "No," said Lars, "you won't if you sit still, but when we land you will all have to help. You will have to step out into the water." Jessie said, "That will be all right, Lars. All our clothes will dry in a short time in this heat." The family looked back at the Sea Star. It was getting further and further away. They all waved at Captain Brown. Then Henry saw that Violet had a large cloth bag in her hand. "What's in that big bag, Violet?" he asked. "A secret," said Violet. "Oh, tell us," said Benny. "Oh, no, Benny," said Violet. "This is what a secret is. You don't tell anybody." "Don't bother her, Ben," said Mike. "Violet can have a secret if she wants to. I don't even want to know myself." Then they all looked at the island. It came nearer and nearer. There were great rocks on one side. Palm trees were hanging over the edge. All around the water was blue, blue. "I never saw such a lovely blue," cried Jessie. "You never will," said Lars. "They say this is the bluest bay in the world. We call it Blue Bay. Now take off your shoes and throw them in the middle of the boat. Be ready to jump out and pull the boat up on the sand." The waves were high now. Every wave took the boat nearer shore. Lars gave a quick pull on the oars. "Now!" he shouted. Everyone jumped over the side into the water. Mr. Alden surprised them all. He helped on the heavy end of the boat. Lars said, "Now!" The sailors gave a great pull as everyone helped. The boat slid up on the sand. "Wonderful," said Lars. "That is the fine landing." Now they were all soaking wet. "Not for long," said Benny. "We'll dry in no time. The sun is so hot." "I don't want to get dry," said Mike. "I'd like to go in and out of the water." The sailors climbed into the other boat and rowed back to the ship. "Come here a minute," said Lars. Benny, Mike and everyone come here. He did not smile. When everyone was there, he said, "You must not get into this water any time you like." "I know why," said Henry. "Sharks." "Right," said Lars. "I suppose you have read about them." He was surprised. "I will show you a fine place later, but we must get right to work. Now, first thing, we must make a place to sleep tonight. We haven't much time." The family stood on the beautiful white sand. They looked all around. "What a beautiful place," said Violet softly. There were palm trees as far as they could see. Lovely flowers grew all over the trees. The flowers were bright red and yellow and white. The children saw trees and flowers and butterflies. But Lars and Mr. Alden saw banana trees, breadfruit trees and coconuts. As they looked, a great flock of bluebirds rose in the air. Their big bills were bright orange. They did not make a sound. "They can't sing," said Lars. "They are just pretty." Then suddenly Mike shouted as loud as he could, "2 houses! Look! 2 houses!" Chapter 5. Food. At Mike's loud voice, everyone looked ahead. There were 2 old huts. The family started to walk toward them. Mike got there first. "All broken down," he said. "Not good after all." Lars said, "Yes, they are broken down, Mike, but I wouldn't say they were no good." "They are certainly better than nothing," said Mr. Alden. "Remember, we must have something to sleep in this very night. We have no time to rebuild the huts." The old huts were side by side and made of bamboo and sugar cane. There were holes in the roof and sides. Lars went up to the first one and shook. It did not fall down. I hope these were still here, said Lars. We can fix them before any rains come, Mr. Alden, and we may not get here when it rains. How can you be sure about rain? Asked Henry. It may rain any minute. Right, it may. I must work on the roofs tomorrow. We just fixed the floors for tonight. How? Asked Mike. Do you see those tall ferns? Lars pointed. Get all you can and bring them here. The whole family began to pick the huge ferns. Mike said, They smell good, don't they, Ben? Yes, delicious, said Benny. We can smell them all night. Mike could hardly walk with his load. He threw them down in front of the first hut. Now what? He asked. Lay them all over the floor, said Lars. They must be too deep. Then get some more. They all worked very hard, but it was fun. They finished one hut and started the other. Soon that was done too. 5 blankets were put in the first hut. 2 blankets were put in the other. That hut is for the girls, said Mr. Alden. They have a whole hut all to themselves. At last Mike stood still. He said, Lars, I really thought the first thing would be finding something for us to eat, not picking so many ferns. Hungry, Mike? Asked Henry, laughing. Now you've got something there, brother. I am hungry as a bear. Where are those bananas, Lars? Look over your head, said Lars. I see nothing but leaves, said Henry. But what enormous leaves. They are as big as I am. Lars smiled. The bananas are behind those leaves, he said. Just give me the hatchet. Lars was soon out of sight, and when he came back he had a huge bunch of yellow bananas. Eat only one now, he said to the boys, then we'll start supper. Oh, what are we going to have? Asked Jessie. I didn't know I was so hungry. Let's open the canned meat, said Mike. Oh no, said Benny, let's save the meat. Why? Asked Mike. Save it for what? Oh, I don't know, said Benny. Let's have beans. He looked at Lars. Yes, Mr. Mike, said Lars. I think we had better have the beans. He winked and smiled at Benny. Why? Asked Mike. Because I like beans better, said Lars, smiling. Benny and Lars were the only ones who saw the joke. They knew that there were 3 cans of meat and 20 cans of beans. All right, Lars, said Mike. Certainly we will have beans if you like them better. Good, said Lars. We must have a fire for beans. He looked at Benny and laughed. Do you want a lot of dry sticks, Lars? Asked Henry. Exactly right, said Lars, much pleased. Bring them down to the beach. Lars and Violet found some flat stones on the beach. First Lars dug a hole in the sand. Then they built a little fire with the stones. Lars put on the dry sticks and lit a match. Soon the fire blazed high. Aren't you glad Henry remembered the matches? Asked Benny. He was kneeling on the sand watching. Yes, we are very lucky, said Lars. Now that's going to be a fine fire soon. The fire burned well. Everyone put on sticks. Open the beans, Henry, cried Lars. 2 big cans. 3 cans, shouted Mike. I can eat 1 can all by myself. Think of tomorrow, Mike, said Jessie. No, Jessie, we can think of something else tomorrow, said Mike. So Henry opened 3 cans of baked beans. Lars took the biggest pan with the handle. He put the beans in it and put it over the fire. Stir that, he said to Mike. It will keep you busy. You sit and smell the beans. He gave Mike a long spoon. Now we need plates, said Jessie. Maybe you could find something, said Lars. I know, said Jessie suddenly. Come on, Violet. The 2 girls ran down the beach. Soon they came back with 7 large shells. We washed them in salt water, said Violet, and here are some spoons. She showed Lars 7 long razor clamshells. Good, said Lars. We can eat beans with them anyway. Not soup, though, said Mike. No, not soup, said Lars. I'll tell you what would be fun. Everyone can make a spoon for himself. You can take my knife. I have a knife, said Henry. I have a knife, said Benny. And me too, shouted Mike. Now, don't forget me, said Mr. Alden. So have I. Violet laughed. She said, Jessie and I will take your knife, Lars, but I'm not a very good spoon maker. I'll make you one, Violet, said Benny kindly. You might cut yourself. These beans are hot, cried Mike. I'm going to take them off the fire. Lars took the big spoon and he filled the 7 shells. The family began to eat as if they were starved. Good, said Benny. What else can we eat? Milk and more bananas, said Lars. Not a very good meal, but we can't have everything on a far-off island. I think it is a very good meal, Lars, said Benny. Jessie said, Violet and I found a fine dishwashing place. She ate the rest of her beans and began to eat a banana. If you all wash your own shells, it won't be much work. After supper, the whole family went down the beach to the little sea pool. Benny said, No sharks can get in here, Lars. There are too many rocks, right? Right, said Lars. Jessie said, Now look down into the water. The water here is just like air. So it's clear. You can see the sand and all those funny things. Shells and crabs and coloured fish, said Benny. That water is 4 feet deep in those pools, said Lars. And see how clear it is? Jessie is right. It is just like air. Oh, look at that big fish swimming in, cried Benny. That's a groper, said Lars. They get caught in these pools at low tide. Can't they ever get out? Asked Mike. Not until high tide, said Lars, and low tide is the time to catch them. Here's where we go fishing then, said Henry. That's right, said Lars. We can make a good fish stew with groper and dry milk. Jessie shook the water out of her shell. She looked at Mike. He was very quiet. Time you went to bed, she said. Mike can hardly keep his eyes open. Yes, I can too, Jessie, said Mike with a loud voice, but he walked very slowly. When he reached the first house, he went in and curled up on his blanket like a little dog. Benny did the same. Mr. Alden laughed and said, Good night, girls. Yell if you want anything, said Lars. Remember now. Jessie and Violet curled up on their blankets in their own little house. The whole family slept till morning. Chapter 6. Surprises. Mr. Alden woke first. He lay very still. He thought to himself, breakfast will be strange for me. No coffee. I must learn to get along without my morning coffee. Then he went to sleep again. Soon he was awake. He sat up and looked around. He was alone. Lars was gone and the boys were gone. Then Mr. Alden smelled something. He got up at once and went to the door. Down on the beach, Lars had a fire. Henry and Jessie and the 2 boys were kneeling down, putting on sticks. Jessie sat on a rock with a smile on her face. And what was on the fire? A coffee pot! Mr. Alden walked down to the beach as fast as he could. Everyone began to laugh. Benny shouted, Surprise! Surprise! Aren't you surprised, Grandfather? I never was so surprised in my whole life, cried Mr. Alden, and I am delighted to have my coffee. So am I, said Lars. He winked at Mr. Alden. I was going to give it up too. Mr. Alden sat down on a rock. Now, which of you thought of my breakfast coffee? I'm going to guess. Mike put his hand on Mr. Alden's knee. You will guess right the first time, he said. Violet? Guessed Mr. Alden. That was your secret? The coffee and the coffee pot were in the big bag? Right, said everyone except Violet, but she looked very happy. Suddenly Benny said, I see you opened the box of sea biscuits, Mike. I did not, cried Mike. I never touched the sea biscuits. You didn't? Well, somebody did, said Benny. I noticed that too, said Lars, and he looked at all the children. The box was open this morning. They all said that they had not opened it. Some of the crackers were gone, said Lars. He looked hard at Mike. I didn't touch the box, Lars, cried Mike. Honestly, really, I don't like crackers too much, and I'll tell you if I wanted something to eat. Yes, you would, Mike, said Violet kindly, but Lars still looked at Mike. Henry looked at Benny. Tell me, Benny, how did you know the box was open? I couldn't have toast for breakfast, said Benny, and I thought maybe crackers would be good. So then I saw the box was open. I never opened it, shouted Mike. I know you didn't, Mike, Benny went on, but Lars, you don't know Mike as well as I do. He would never take anything like that. Never, 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 never. That's enough nevers, Ben, said Henry, looking up. We believe you. Lars doesn't, said Benny. No, said Henry, but he will very soon. He doesn't know any of us too well, remember? Lars said to Mike, I know you better now. They all stand up for you, so I know you didn't take the crackers. Good, said Mike. Thank you, Lars. I really, really didn't. Let's not talk about it any more, said Henry. What are we going to do today, Lars? We ought to explore the island, said Lars. I want you to see the spring where the water comes from. Be careful of the coconuts. They may fall on your head. If you hear one coming from the trees, you must get out from under fast. Soon the shells and cups and coffee pot were washed in the ocean. There were no beds to make, so they all followed Lars into the dark green woods where the ferns grew. It was a hard walk, and after a while Mr. Alden sat down on a rock to rest. He said, You go along, I'll stay here till you come back. Won't you be lonesome, Grandfather? Asked Violet. I'll stay with you. No, my dear, said Mr. Alden. He smiled at Violet. You go along with the others. I'll be all right. So they all climbed over the rocks and through the bushes until Henry said, Listen, water. Then they came to the spring. It was like a big round bowl in a rock. It was full of clear, cold water. The water came from a white waterfall which filled the bowl. Then it flowed over into another waterfall. Benny climbed above it to sit down. He found himself sitting on a beautiful curved rock covered with moss. Oh, said Violet, what a beautiful big rock. Isn't it funny? How could it come here all by itself? I don't see another rock anywhere around that's like it. Well, said Benny, it looks like a great, big, enormous nose. Lars looked at it and said, Benny, I think it is a nose. I never noticed it when I was here before, but I think it is part of an old statue. The people on Easter Island had hundreds of enormous statues. Nobody knows why they made so many. This looks like the noses on their statues. It fell down, said Benny. It must be very big. The nose is twice as long as I am. Let's look for a mouth and some eyes. Henry called, I think the eyes are over here. My, what a big statue, said Mike. Maybe 100 feet long. Maybe, said Jessie. I wonder who made it. I don't know, said Lars, but this was a temple. You may be sure of that. Long, long ago, said Benny. Let's have a drink out of that waterfall. Benny drank first, and then he climbed down from the big nose. As he did so, he saw a shell. He did not say a word, but he thought to himself, what a funny place for a big shell. And it is clean too. It looks like a water cup. Benny left the shell right where it was. He said, It's beside the white stone. I'll remember. Just then he saw Jessie looking up into the tall trees. He looked up too. The wind was not blowing at all, but one tree was moving. And there was a crash, and down came a coconut. That's funny. Here's a coconut, said Lars. It isn't even ripe. He looked up, but he saw nothing. He began, "Jessie, you know—" Then he stopped. "What were you going to say, Lars?" asked Violet softly. Lars looked at the gentle little girl. He did not want to frighten her, so he said, "Nothing, I guess. I was so surprised to see a coconut fall here. It is so dark in here that the coconuts are not ripe yet." Mike looked at Benny. Benny looked at Mike. They both thought Lars was going to say something else, but they did not say a word. They did not want to frighten Violet either. "We'll go back," said Lars. "It's a shorter walk on the sand than through the woods. Then we'll soon see your grandfather." They did find it easy to walk on the hard sand. Sometimes there were piles of rocks, but it was fun to climb over them too. "There is another sea pool," said Henry. He bent over and looked at it. "Oh, look!" cried Benny. "Do look at this!" He was sitting on a rock looking down into the clear water. Everyone jumped over the rocks and looked. "What do you know?" said Henry. The pool was filled with white sand under the clear water, but on the sand was a pattern of stones. In the middle was a beautiful white stone, perfectly round. There was a border of red stones around this. 4 big pink stones were laid on the 4 sides. Between pink stones were black ones, and round the edge was a beautiful border of 3 colours. These stones were red, white, and blue. Red, white, and blue. For a minute nobody spoke, and then it all came out. Benny said, "There is a mystery here. That didn't just happen for nothing. Somebody made it." So at last everyone was thinking the same thing. Somebody is on this island.